The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, we're just going to give people a couple of minutes to join and then we'll get started. Hello and welcome to the webinar, Best Practice Email Marketing 101. I'm your host, Bryan, Customer Success Manager at Loqate. We provide a host of data validation services to over 13,000 customers globally across every sector, from finance to retail. I'm joined by Karen Bailey, GBG's Digital Marketing Specialist, who brings a wealth of experience, both client and agency side, in terms of on and offline marketing, and Rhys Owens, Account Manager at IBM Watson. He's been working in data and customer engagement for over 6 years. I'm shortly going to hand over to Karen, who's going to talk about the importance of knowing your audience, after which I'm going to cover a few slides on data quality, and then Rhys is going to talk us through a real-world example of an IBM customer who's put these best practices in place. Karen, over to you.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. So I guess we'll start with kind of trying to understand why it's actually important to understand your audience. So marketers know that their aim is to send the right message to the right person in the right channel at the right time to be able to capture the interest of your customers. But the challenge is, how do you know what the best time is or what the right message is? And it all comes down to understanding your audience, which we believe needs 3 key elements. And they are technology, people, and data. Now, by this, I mean that you need to have the right technology in place to be able to properly make sense of your data and actually use it for campaigns. You also need to have the right people in place who both understand how they can make use of that data in the best way and how to use the technology properly. And those two very much go together, but you'll have noticed that you can't even talk about them without mentioning data. For me, data is the absolute fundamental building block of any marketing campaign. Without it, you're at best going to be doing batch and blast campaigns and hoping that something resonates with someone in the audience. That is just not going to work. It's just not going to ingratiate your brand with your customers in 2019. But there's a couple of challenges here, and being able to get and then use that data, it's really hard. It's a really difficult thing to do. There's 2 key challenges, and that's the challenges of data overload and analysis paralysis, which I very much enjoy saying. So just to explain those a little bit more, there's absolutely stacks of data that you could get about your customers. In fact, there's probably stacks of data you've already got about your customers and actually you're not using yet. IBM actually have a great stat, which is that most businesses only analyze 0.5% of the customer data that they have, even though 30% of it is actually useful. So there's a couple of sort of interesting facts from that you can take. So first of all, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of data that's just not that useful to you in that moment to send those campaigns. And there's also the fact that there's an awful lot of really very useful data that actually isn't getting used at all. Which brings us to the second issue, which is analysis paralysis, whereby you are presented with a boatload of data as a marketer. But what do you do with it? How do you make sense of it? How do you actually use it? How do you understand your customer with it? And often what we see is marketers either doing endless analysis but never actually getting anywhere with it, or just not even getting started with it because it's such an overwhelming task. The age-old, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. However, the opportunity for marketers is massive. Once you can cut through that noise and start getting a better understanding of your audience, and I use the word audience here quite deliberately because although the people you're going to be talking to will include your customers, it's also going to include prospects and lapsed customers. And you often need to talk to them in a slightly different way than somebody who is a current customer, for example. But once you kind of get a better understanding of your audience, then you can start doing some really powerful data-driven marketing that can really help you deliver relevant messaging to your customers at the right time for them. And that's kind of the crucial bit here. So I guess a good place to start is explaining what I mean by data-driven marketing. Marketers are a little bit notorious for just throwing jargon and acronyms out there without actually explaining in any way what they mean. So when I'm talking about data-driven marketing, I'm talking about campaigns that are done not on your schedule as a brand, like, oh, it's Tuesday, so I'll send my sales newsletter out, or, oh, I've just finished this campaign, so I'll send it out at 3 p.m. today. But more as a direct result of something that your customers have done, something in their lives, a behavioural event that makes a change in your relationship with them, i.e. something that they do, or actually sometimes something that they don't do. All of it is about making or finding a really relevant event to your customer. And that can be really powerful stuff. Done well, you can get amazing results from this kind of campaign, like a 15-fold increase in response rate over a standard campaign. And that's come from Gartner research. The reason for this is simply that you're working to the customer's lifestyle and not the other way around. You're giving them relevant messages and information when they're interested in it, not when you've finished your campaign or because you always send out a message on a Tuesday. And you can see from some of these stats on the slide that you can see, 96% of people receive that kind of campaign positively versus only 16% for a non-data driven campaign. That's a massive difference. So what kind of data can you use for this? Well, we tend to group the possible events into three areas. And first of all, there's external events. And that's events which are external to your brand, but relevant to your customer. Like they have a baby, or they move house, or even purchasing with one of your competitors. You often can't get that kind of data in-house, but going through a data partner, you might be able to get this kind of information about your customers and your prospects. And you can use these things to relate your brand to your customers. So, for example, if you're a home furnishings retailer, then knowing somebody has recently moved house or is shortly going to is going to massively increase their chances of buying a sofa, and therefore sending them information about your amazing range of super sofas with special offers and everything else right at that moment is going to massively increase the chances of them going to you to buy that sofa, because you have communicated with them with a relevant message that's useful to them when they need to know about it. There are also things like a simple birthday message. Maybe you can put a voucher in if that's a sort of relevant thing to your brand. And I know not everyone is a retailer, so it might not be relevant, but it doesn't have to be money off either. It could be an experience voucher, like come into our store and we'll give you a glass of champers while you browse, something like that. So it doesn't always have to be about money off. So next, you've got calendar events. So Black Friday, Christmas, end of tax year, International Hot Dog Day, maybe perhaps not quite that one. But to be fair, if you can make it relevant to your brand, both to your customer and your brand, I should say, then go for it. Be a bit imaginative. Some of the best campaigns that I see aren't the ones which are about Black Friday or Christmas, and you get the 12 days of Christmas, which should be after Christmas, and everyone does them before. You see the same thing from everyone. Some of the most interesting campaigns I see are actually ones which are not the obvious ones. They are International Hot Dog Day or something slightly left field. So rather than going for a Valentine's Day message, going for a St. Dwynwen message, and she is the patron saint of lovers. She's the Welsh equivalent of St. Valentine, basically. It's just about making sure that it's important and relevant for you as a brand and for your customer, and making sure that it's relevant is the absolute clue. So if you, for example, take the start of a school year, so if you're a retailer that sells kids' clothes, that's an obvious one. If you sell stationery, that's an obvious one. If you're a travel brand, it's worth knowing when that is, because that's the end of the time when that will be the peak season. But what if you're you're an insurance broker? So maybe not quite as relevant for an insurance broker for end of school holidays. But I say maybe because actually it might be quite a fun campaign for an insurance broker to go with, hey, your kids are back at school now. You've got time to sort out that insurance renewal. Only works if that's the kind of personality of your brand and it fits the tone of voice, obviously. So perhaps not suitable for everyone, but you can see how you can take a calendar event, a simple calendar event, and make it interesting, make it relevant for you and your customers. So the third type of event that we classify is ones that are internal to your relationship with your customer. And this is things like downloading a brochure from your website, or requesting information, or abandoning their online shopping cart, or abandoning the completion of a form to donate to your charity, or something triggered from a customer entering a location. I've seen some really great things done with coffee shops, for example, just high street coffee shops, where if a customer has the app installed on their phone, and they go within a certain distance of one of their shops, they get a push notification or an email saying, hey, come on in, get a free cake. Maybe that's just my wishful thinking. I don't think I've ever been offered a free cake, but we can hope. And all of that's just done with simple geofencing technology. So you put a little thing in your store, which basically locates that store. You can set up an automated campaign that then sends out a communication to your customers when they're within a certain distance of your shop. So dead easy, very, very simple it's very simple to talk about, but quite simple to implement. And that's the beauty of it. You can automate it. You set it up in advance and let it go and do its thing. And you go off and, you can go off and have a cake, actually. And remember, a lot of this data is actually already available in your company. And it's just a matter of finding out what team it sits within. You might be in the email marketing team, but you might not have visibility of what the Google Analytics is saying, for example. So go and talk to your web team. Go and talk to your CRM team. Go and talk to people in store. Go and see what other data that there is that's available, and try and bring it together so you get a holistic view of your customer. And then it's just a case of making sure that it's all compliant with data privacy legislation, both where you and your customers are. Just need to tick that little legal box. But as long as it is, you're away. You are effectively limited only by your imagination and probably the key pitfall of this, which is your data quality. It's the age-old adage of rubbish in, rubbish out. If your data is incomplete or incorrect or out of date or indeed all of the above, it's going to be much harder, or actually sometimes impossible, to actually make use of it and to have relevant conversations with your customers.
Fantastic. Thanks, Karen. That was really insightful. I'm going to talk very quickly now about the importance of data quality. People are sending a lot of emails. There are currently 269 billion emails sent every day globally across 3.8 billion users, and that number is expected to exceed 4.3 billion by 2022. Crucially, however, only 10% of emails that are captured by organizations are accurate. We at Loqate surveyed over 3,000 global consumers for their attitudes towards email marketing. The UK leads the way for percentage of people who check their emails at least once per day, followed closely by the US and then Germany. Interestingly, the age ranges differ per region, with 45 to 54-year-olds checking emails more often in the UK, whereas it's a slightly younger group of 35 to 44-year-olds in the US and a slightly older group of 55 to 64-year-olds in Germany. Perhaps something to consider when tailoring marketing content for those regions. Over a quarter of respondents said they'd experienced issues due to not receiving an email when they should have, and over half of respondents in every region said they would be unlikely or very unlikely to trust a brand if they failed to send vital comms due to incorrect email data. Finally, men are more likely than women to deliberately falsify their online email when entered online. I think the key there is to ensure that the customer is giving a compelling reason to provide their email address in the first place. So the key takeaway really here is that email has the potential of being a really fantastic way of communicating with your customers, but you've got to get the details right. That leads me on to the 1-10-100 rule, which is a concept which outlines the order of magnitude increase in hidden costs associated with poor data quality. At the top of the pyramid is the cost of ensuring data is accurate at the point of capture. So that's using a tool such as the one we provide for email validation. This is the best and most cost-efficient way of validating a customer's data, because you've got the customer there entering it at the point that you're capturing it. And so they're the very best person, obviously, to validate that it's correct. Not only does this have the least amount of overhead for you as a business, it also improves the customer journey. So really, it should be a no-brainer. The middle segment, the 10, is the cost if your customer doesn't validate at the point of capture. So usually this would involve either an automated batch service to clean it up, or employing someone to validate the data manually. Automated batch systems are great, we provide one ourselves, but the accuracy levels are always going to be lower when it's an automated system. And obviously, if you're manually processing this data, for example, getting someone to ring the customer up to confirm the details over the phone, the expense there is going to be a lot greater. So 1 is capturing up front, 10 is if you're waiting to capture it after the fact. All of that cost, however, pales in significance compared to the cost to your business of leaving that incorrect data in your system. And there are all sorts of reasons why this might be. Invoices could be going to the wrong place and so not being paid. You might be making deliveries to the wrong address, and so you've got the cost of resending that package, but then you've also got the cost of customer service when that angry customer phones up. You've got lower click-through rates from email marketing campaigns. You've got negative messages going through on social media. So the impact on brand and the cost to your business for leaving that data in your system is potentially huge. And that's where the 100, that's the order of magnitude difference is the 100 there. So while many customers are focusing on cleaning up data after the fact, the most accurate and cost-effective method is to make sure that you're cleaning it up at the point of capture. So I mentioned briefly at the start that Loqate work with customers in all sorts of sectors, with retail, finance and fintech, e-services, gaming, hospitality and travel. We also work with a number of partners. The quote here on the screen is from Lakeland. They've been a customer of Loqate for many years, and they use our services to validate data capture online. And that segues nicely into Rhys's section, and so I shall hand over to him to talk us through a case study.
Great, thank you very much for that. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So we're going to talk about some kind of real world examples around how IBM can support businesses to ensure that they're sending timely and relevant communications on the basis of the data, the kind of data that GB Group are serving here. So if we could move on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about Lakeland. For those of you on the call that aren't aware or do not regularly engage with their brand, they are one of the UK home shopping pioneers with 68 stores around the UK and nearly half a century of experience working in that field. They offer incredible collections across kitchenware, home, garden, and lots of nice gifts, including things like Christmas hampers at Christmas time and all sorts of lovely things like that. They've been a customer of ours for 5 years and also a customer of Loqate for 15. So we have a long and rich history working with this brand. And people generally have a great affinity to Lakeland, particularly because of their store experience. And that was something that we wanted to replicate online via the email communications to ensure that they were increasing, profits and revenues by offering more tailored communications to their customers based on the experiences that they were having online. Okay, if we could move on to the next slide. So at this point, when we started working with the account, they were sending out, lots of email communications. Many of these were not particularly targeted. They were very much in the old kind of method of batch and blast, sending weekly newsletters, the same message to their entire database or a large volume of their database, not really focusing on dynamic content or automated behaviors. And they did have some simple campaign flows that they started with, for things like welcome journey. However, they were having some difficulty with some of their data and sign-ups not actually coming through to that system. They did send out some nice things like birthday campaigns and other seasonal offers. But really, they were not targeting their customers on the basis of, email behavior. They were not focusing on web behavior as well. So how are people interacting with your brand? How would they like to hear from you? And they were not adapting, the communication flow and what emails they were receiving, but they were also not adapting the content within those either. As mentioned, the automated campaigns were at a fairly basic level, something like a simple welcome series, and that was something that we were looking to improve. On that basis, we started engaging with them in a deeper kind of methodology, working with them to drive towards more behavior-driven campaigns, and really started focusing on the basics around that. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So those behavioural-driven campaigns, we focused on, to start with, the welcome series, which they were having some issues around. There were a number of areas on their website in which you could access signing up to the newsletter, and what that meant is some of the data was not getting into their system. So what we did is we refined their data and improved that data flow to ensure that everybody was receiving the welcome campaign and directly improving that first engagement that people were having with the brand. Now, beyond that, and where we really started to move the needle with them, and where their kind of investment really started to kind of reap rewards, was around tailored behavioural campaigns to do with things like abandoned cart, abandoned browse, etc. So at this point, they were not targeting people on whether they had things in their basket, whether they'd started looking at products that hadn't made a purchase. And this is a huge opportunity within retail to improve conversion and drive further sales. So the results were particularly impressive. They have industry-leading engagement rates both through open and click-through. On top of that, this improved their ROI drastically because they were sending relevant, tailored campaigns. They still send out newsletters, which are incredibly successful for them because the content is read and understood by their customers, and they look forward to those at the times of the week that they come. But what they're able to do now is send these relevant, targeted communications that we're going to impact directly on real revenue metrics. Outside of Lakeland, I'm going to kind of steer away and talk about some actual exact metrics for published kind of case studies that we have with other brands, because the solution itself is not only there to work with retail. It operates in many industries and verticals. So we also work with STV, so Scottish Television, and we work hard to understand more about their customers based on their online behaviours and target them with specific programs. Target them with specific communications around the programs that they were watching. What this did, and on the basis of when they watched a program, was we were able to increase the open rate of their emails by around 80%. Now, with that kind of increase to the open rate, that meant significantly more engagement on their website, more people clicking through to watch more programs, and they saw an increase of 55% of additional streams online. Now, this meant they had a far more captive audience, and therefore they're able to increase their advertising revenues. So on top of that, we also work with a number of other companies as well, and yet another different field. One of our other case studies is the Rugby Football Union, so England RFU, and they had a slightly different issue, which was they're able to sell out all the England home games very quickly. For anything like the Six Nations, it's almost an instant sale that they'll fill the stadium. However, they do have a number of other events, including Premiership Rugby, semi-finals, some of the Barbarians Test matches, where they really struggled to fill the stadium, and they found that they were kind of languishing down at the 30-40% mark of capacity. Now, what that meant is there's a huge cost to putting those events on, and sometimes they were losing money. So what they did is they started targeting customers which they knew had shown a propensity to buy tickets in the past, and also customers who were located very closely to the stadium itself, especially coming up to kind of last minute. Now, what they did in the first instance when they used these kind of campaigns, they saw a drastic 50% increase in ticket sales for the next match by sending these targeted tailored communications based on what they understood around those customers, the behaviours that they'd exhibited, on the website and buying tickets in the past, and the information that we were able to take around their location and whether they would be, able to attend a match at the last minute. Okay, so there's a couple of examples there. I wanted to include some outside of retail because I know we have a number of customers on the line that operate in different industries. We'll go back to Lakeland now and move on to the final slide that I've got. So what's next for Lakeland? So now that they've got their kind of automated email campaigns in place and they're targeting people based on behaviours, their real focus now is to improve their multi-channel campaigns and start engaging across these other areas. So now that email is, they've completed what was required in email, then they're now looking at other channels, including SMS, social. We can also provide services for mobile push, and we can drive communications for direct mail and also to the call center as well from our system. So when focusing on these other communication channels, it's important to understand which channel is going to be most successful for which kind of campaigns. So generally we find that SMS works really well for service-based messaging or last-minute sales information if you want to go down the marketing route. And then social works really well as an acquisition tool. So what we do is we provide a UI which takes all the data around customer behaviors from the website, also from the email campaigns and any other behaviors that we can pull into the system. And we're able to leverage that and publish audiences to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to be able to send social messages to people that look like those people. Now, anybody who works in social on the line will know that That's something that Facebook have been offering for some time. And what we've done is we've leveraged their APIs to provide one simple UI to manage those communications and targeted messages across those different platforms. And what you start to benefit from with multi-channel, once you start using these other channels as well, is all of that additional insight. So the insight from emails, from push notifications, from SMSs, and from social can help drive each other. And you can also ensure that if they're all residing in the same place, that you're treating each customer as an individual and targeting them with the right message at the right time, on the right platform for them. So that pretty much summarizes, what it is that we do with Lakeland. We've worked with them for quite some time now. It's a great partnership, and we really enjoy working with them. The next step is multi-channel and continuing to learn more about their customers and drive further behavioural driven campaigns. And that's very much the case that a number of our clients are at. I think the basis for that success is driven out of data, and that's why GB Group and IBM work so well together. And I think, GB Group's fundamentals are around data, as are IBM. And with them and ourselves, we're able to leverage their big data capabilities, email verification, etc., to then drive really specific targeted campaigns to the right people. Okay, that pretty much summarizes everything that I was going to go through on Lakeland and some of those other examples. I hope that was useful, and I'll pass back.
That's great. Thanks very much, Rhys. That was really interesting. So on to our final slide before we look at some questions. Karen, I'll start with you. If there was one key action you'd like our audience to take away, what would that be?
It's all about getting to know your customer. It's about really getting to grips with what data that you have, what you can get, and really start thinking about ways in which you can use that data. And the more ideas you come up with, even if some of them you go, actually, that was rubbish, I won't sort of use that one. Sometimes coming up with a really out there idea can actually spinball to something else where you go, actually, no, that's a great idea. What about if you did, and you could, and you go off and you create something actually quite wonderful. So yeah, it's about getting to know your customer and getting to know your data.
Fab. And Rhys, same question for you.
Yeah, so I would agree with that as well. I think the other thing I would take away is not to kind of rest on your laurels. It's a very competitive space. We're always competing. We're competing for them to look at your emails, look at your other communications, and you really want them to take note. So, as Karen alluded to, don't be afraid to stand out from the crowd. It's perfectly reasonable to try and capture attention by many different ways. What I talked about today was the more general ways in which you can drive, revenues and ROI by looking to improve conversion and things like that. But on top of that as well, it's really good to be out of the box to drive further engagement and get people excited about what you have to do.
Great. And from my point of view, all of this is fantastic, but you can't do it if you haven't got the good quality data. So if you're not validating data now, you really should be. Fantastic. So we'll take a look at some questions now. If anyone has any questions and hasn't already, there should be the option to ask them via the GoToWebinar tool. I'm just seeing if I can make that a bit bigger. But I'll start with the first question, which is to Rhys. What is required to be able to execute these kinds of campaigns?
Okay, so I think we kind of touched on it before, but I'll go through it again and in a bit more detail. So really it's about having data quality. Sorry, I just lost my connection. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yeah. It's all about data quality and being able to understand, the customers that you're targeting, you have the correct information about them, and that you're targeting them based on their behaviours and what they're demonstrating with you. So the fundamentals of getting the data in place. Once you have that data in place, you can really start to drive more engagement by targeting them with campaigns that are really specific to where they are in your customer life cycle.
Okay, thank you. We have another question directed to Karen. There's loads of data that we could get, but how do we choose which campaigns to actually do?
Great question. That is quite difficult, and it is sometimes it's back to that thing about analysis paralysis, isn't it? You end up where you could do a million things, and which one do you start with? It'll be different for different industries. It'll be different for different companies. And I guess the only thing you can do is to try it. Create your own data to be able to learn from. Otherwise, you do just sit there and go, well, what do I do? What do I do? And you run around like a headless chicken, and you never actually get to trying anything. The kind of best advice I can give would be try something out and give yourself a challenge to try something different once a month for 6 months, for a year, and try it out, see if it's working, see if it's giving you some really good kind of responses, some really good click-through, some revenue, if that's the sort of metric you're looking for. And if it isn't, stop it, try something else. And if it is, great, leave it running, try something else anyway, see what else you can do. So I would say give yourself a challenge, try something new each month, and look at the data that you create from those campaigns and see what's working.
Fab. We'll do one more question. This is all very well for B2C, but what about B2B companies? I'll take that one. It's just as important for both, to be honest with you. And if you're validating data, tools such as ours can work for B2C and B2B email addresses. You should be doing the same things for both. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for those questions. Thank you for dialing in. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Rhys. Thank you and goodbye.